And I'm going to call this Transportation Policy Board meeting to order. Can we start with some introductions?
Okay. Do you want me to handle that, Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay. From the City of Olympia.
Good morning, Danny Madrone with the Olympia City Council.
And City of Lacey.
Andy Ryder, the Mayor of Lacey, and your chair.
And Tumwater.
Peter Haddad, the City of Tumwater.
And Tenino.
John O'Callahan representing the great city of Tenino.
And Intercity Transit.
Don Melnick, Authority Member representing Interstate Transit.
Port of Olympia.
Hi, good morning, Joe Downing, Port of Olympia.
And Washington State Department of Transportation.
Good morning, Gaius Sonoy, Olympic Region.
Morning, guys. Our business representative, Wasson. Oh, you're muted.
You're on
Dave.
mute.
Okay, Dave Watson, Antigo Coffee Business Rep.
And community representative Murray.
This is Michelle Murray, Community Rep.
And community rep Millar. Oh, okay. Travis Millar, community representative. Thanks, Travis. I'm just going to scan real quick. Oh, here from Thurston County.
Carolina Mejia, Thurston County Commissioner.
Good morning. And I believe that's who we have so far, Chair.
Okay.
And
well,
Katrina Van Every will handle the staff in the room if you'd like.
great.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good morning. So from Intercity Transit, we have Emily Bergkamp and Jason Hanner. From Thurston County, Matt Unzelman. From the City of Olympia, Michelle Swanson. From the City of Lacey, Martin Hoppy. I'm just doing a quick scan to see if I see anyone else. From TRPC, in addition to Mark and myself, you have Karen Parkhurst, Sarah Porter, Berlina Lucas, Dorinda Merrill, and Dave Reed. And if I did by chance miss someone, please feel free to speak up.
And Chair, I'll note that our emeritus representative, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Pete Kamat.
Morning.
Morning,
Pete.
Pete.
Morning, Pete.
And I think that's all that we have, Chair.
Okay. Do you have any announcements?
I do have a couple of announcements. Few good ones. For the coming biennium for rural transit, we received continuing funding for the next 4 years for the base program of rural transit, and actually a little bit of a plus up even on that base program to deal with some of the increases in costs that we've experienced over the past few years. But we also have received funding to expand some of the services of RT, like reestablishing the connection to Yelm and providing Saturday service. And so we are pretty excited to work on the details of what that looks like and get that expanded service going. So you'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks. We also have the TPB and Council. We adopted a resolution for the Consolidated Grant Program a while ago. One of the other top programs was Catholic Community Services and their Thurston County Bus Buddies program. And they too were awarded 4 years of funding to keep the Bus Buddies program going, which helps people feel comfortable riding the bus, helps to build confidence and understanding in the system, which we know is one of the barriers that people face when choosing transit as their transportation option. And also our own Veronica Jarvis, who isn't on the call this morning, but she's been a bus buddy. So this is a really important program for our region, and excited we've got that funded going forward. Also just wanted to let people know we've got a lot of pavement work that'll be going on Martin Way in July. with the Martin Way study being recently completed and some of the strategies associated with that, the county was able to modify some of what they had planned to do. For example, they're going to put in double lines for bicycle lanes to help improve that safety for bicyclists. So some of that Martin Way work, we talked about how we already have received $700,000 for design for some of the pedestrian crossings, but we're also seeing just the influence in terms of modifying what we're doing on our own currently to better account for what we've learned and what we're planning for through that Martin Way study. So excited about that as well. Thanks, Chair.
Oh, that's great. I mean, when's the last time RT went out to Yelm? We stopped that service a while back.
It was
so-
it was quite some time. Yeah. So it'll be good to get that reestablished. And Saturdays will be a really nice addition as well.
Absolutely. Well, that's all great announcements for sure. With that, can I get approval of today's agenda?
So moved, John O'Callaghan.
Second, Don Milne.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? See none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? And that motion carries unanimously. Next up is the approval of our consent calendar. Can I get a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion about that? Seeing none, and all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? And that motion also unanimously carries. Now we're to the public comment period. We didn't have anyone sign up ahead of time for public comment, but is there anyone in the public wishing to address? Oh, Karen, look at that. Woohoo! Go ahead, Karen. Go ahead and unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and keep your comments about 3 minutes.
Thank you, Karen Messmer. I see on your agenda today that you have the carbon reduction funding discussion and recommendation. And when I read the staff report, and it's something I've actually sensed for a while now, you'll see that there's some real issues with bringing forward projects that, as the staff report said, that really move the needle. And there's a variety of issues going on there, including just there's not capacity with staff. The projects that are already in the pipeline are not necessarily aimed at carbon reduction. And we know that transportation emissions are a big problem for us in terms of carbon emissions. So, I just want to bring up and hope that you can consider and have some conversation about this, to not just talk about where the funds should go and what's fair about the list that the staff brought to you, but what are the problems you're encountering bringing those projects forward that really do move the needle. So in my opinion, you need more staff at your jurisdictions to be working on developing projects that will move the needle. That means working on the trail projects with the county and those jurisdictions that have trails. And you see some coming forward, but we could do a lot more. Same thing with sidewalks, crossings, bicycle support facilities. If we're going to reduce carbon, we're going to have to make some real shift in focus of what staff is spending their time on bringing forward, so that the pipeline has those kinds of projects in the coming years. It's my sense that the current issue, one of the current issues, is there just aren't enough staff to do this, so they're just doing what they already have, and that isn't going to change things and move the needle. So I would encourage you to recommend to TRPC, with your list of things that you think should be funded this time, a real conversation about how we bring more focus to these kinds of projects. There's more money coming, and it's pretty exciting. State and federal funding in the next several years could bring some real changes for us, for Martin Way, which we've just had the conversations about, for our trail system, for the urban areas and the rural areas. But if we don't have the projects in the pipeline now and get them going, that money's going to pass us by, or almost as bad, in my opinion, is it could just go to projects we already thought we were going to do, which is the same old thing we've been doing, which isn't going to change the carbon reduction effort. So I would really encourage you to put forward a little bit of, comment to TRPC council about this, and that TRPC council also have conversation about this. And the jurisdictions really do need to be considering in your budget for 2024, do you have enough staff to bring these things forward? Do you have enough funding to make it really happen? They don't have the time to apply for grants. So that's not going to get us there. So thanks for your time, and I appreciate all your work.
Of course. Is there anyone else wishing to give public comment? Okay, with that, let's go on to our next agenda item, which is a conversation about the 2023 legislative session and planning for 2024. Turn this over to Karen.
Okay, thank you. I am excited to quickly turn the microphone over to Representative Beth Dolio, who is joining us. She's serving her third term representing the 22nd District. She has been a friend to our council, working across the aisle to help us achieve the priorities that we are interested in. She was helpful in moving forward the I-5 work, in allowing us as an MPO, a Metropolitan Planning Organization, to apply for regional mobility grants and many other things. She also was instrumental in helping us achieve funding for the high capacity transportation work that we're doing. And so she's a friend to our council and to the 22nd District. And so I am excited to introduce her, and she's going to chat a bit with us about things. And then we have allowed quite a bit of time for your questions. And so I'm going to turn it over to Beth. Thank you for being here.
Great, thanks, Karen. Well, I'm really excited. We had a great session. The transportation budget is, a record $13.5 billion transportation budget that includes continuing the Move Ahead Washington at $17 billion, and the Connecting Washington package from 2015 continues at $16 billion, and they are funded over the next 16 years. I think that, we were able to continue, to really try and keep our, eliminating delays on major highway projects sort of in time. We invested in the Washington State ferries and also did some legislation to both improve the diversity of the Washington State ferry workforce, as well as we were having some issues around procurement and building, and so allowing for an outside of the state company to bid on those Washington State ferries. We spent a lot of time talking about traffic safety. That's a huge problem. Our rates of injury and deaths really skyrocketed over the last year. We really do know that kids who aren't receiving driver's ed training and they get their license at 18, that's what we really need to address. So we've done some work to sort of reinstate the opportunity for kids to get driver's ed training. And, from where my heart is, and what I was most excited about is we, invested about $1 billion of our Climate Commitment Act money into carbon reduction projects. So just what Karen Mesmer was talking about, there is a lot of money in the pipeline, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about that and provide you with a lot of detailed information. I just sent a couple of documents to Karen that she can share with you. One outlines the Climate Commitment Act dollars, where they're invested across the agencies and across the different funds, and also a district by district look at where our transportation budget actually invested dollars. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the airport at this meeting. It is still coming up. We did do a new bill. I did we're sort of off the table at this point. I mean, the community uproar and also issues with JBLM and the tribe just really take Thurston County out of the running. But I think for me, what I found was that, you know, people were like losing sleep and like just really upset about the thought of an airport going in near them. And so it really made me recognize what people who are actually living with an airport, that SeaTac Airport, go through every day. And so I really tried to emphasize and get some language in that bill that requires us to really look holistically at the system and better utilize the infrastructure that we already have, and also really make sure that we're thinking about all modalities that can reduce air traffic generally, right? So are there rail options? Are there other sorts of options that allow us to reduce the amount of air traffic that we have overall while using our current infrastructure? And do we really need a greenfield if we actually utilize, maybe the Olympia Airport or Payne Field, Yakima? There's lots of airport infrastructure out there that is underutilized currently in terms of what we could be doing there. So I think it's a good bill. Representative Fye, the chair of the Transportation Committee, he took that on. It was the first thing we talked about as a committee was the airport issue. It was literally the first hearing we had. And there was ultimately a bill that I think took into account a lot of what we were hearing in the communities. And, both he and I and Rep. Barkus, played a role in that because our communities were directly impacted, our districts, by the CAC process, which is no longer. So I'm glad to see intercity transit on here. Intercity transit really cleaned up in the budget. They did get some money for a hydrogen, couple of, I think it's, I don't know, 1 point, it's a lot of money for hydrogen hub or hydrogen projects. Maybe the person from, let's see, it's intercity transit 1.2. Oh, that's for the ramp. So there's a Martin Way Park and Ride ramp access that Intercity Transit got. Twin Transit also did quite well and got a number of things in the budget. They also, Intercity Transit got rear door boarding and real-time passenger information deployment. They also got the zero emission hydrogen demonstration project, $6 million. We continue work on the Nisqually Delta Marvin Road to Mounts Road with 5.7 million, and the interchange as well got some cash. And the Deschutes Valley Trail Connection, I'm glad to see former Mayor Komet on here. That is a big project that he worked on. 4.8 million, 1 million this year, 4.8 million in the 25-27 biennium. And we continue to work on the intercity transit maintenance facility, which, as you know, if you've taken that tour, it is absolutely gorgeous, and a great facility for our community. Where are you? There you are. Okay. So maybe that's and then of course we got the language in. Karen was really great in continuing to communicate with us about that. And actually, it was very important to Representative Barkus when I was doing some research for today's, for talking with you today. I learned that Representative Barkus really hammered that home, and he was really the one responsible for getting that finally into the House budget. So he's a great ranking member of our Transportation Committee and does super work there. So we did get that language in. So I'm assuming you're going to be applying for grants to the Regional Mobility Program. That's exciting. So just talking a little bit about CCA dollars. So as you know, polluting, if you're, you know, releasing greenhouse gases in the air, you cannot do that any longer in Washington State without paying for it. And those dollars then are used to invest in carbon emission reduction projects. And so there's basically, and you know, until we actually reduce emissions, we have a permanent source of funding. I guess it's semi-permanent because ultimately we want it to go away, but it is permanent for now to actually invest in carbon reduction around transportation. And it's kind of interesting because we have two chairs in the Senate, you know, there's Mark Elias in the Senate and Jake Fye in the House, and they have different priorities. And so you can see in the budget that they both, you know, sort of a yes and, right, and with the available dollars. So Marco Leos is really focused on getting youth riding transit. So we have free transit for youth across the state and on Amtrak. So if you're 18 years or under, you are free, just like we are in intercity transit. And also we got intercity transit gets some cash from that program as well for our free fare program. There's a lot of investment, thanks to Marco Leos, around active transportation, pedestrians, some of the things that Karen Mesmer was talking about. There is a lot of money dedicated to that in our budget through those CCA dollars. And then you know, Representative Fye and I and others in the House really worked on getting monies into medium and heavy duty truck mobility in terms of electrification. Though that's where our largest source of emissions are coming for. So really investing and trying to electrify that. We, you know, invested in drayage and port electrification and EV charging network across the state, electric school buses. So, you know, all of that there's a ton of money. And I did send Karen a spreadsheet that like details all of that and what accounts they're from and all of that. So definitely worth a look through. So moving to the federal budget, you know, DOT is definitely taking advantage of many of the programs that came through the infrastructure, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. And then, of course, there's the IRA dollars as well, the Inflation Reduction Act. I wanted to talk about NEVI, which is the National EV Infrastructure Act. We get about $70 billion. Every state across the nation, 50 states are getting dollars to help from the federal government through the infrastructure project to build out our EV network. They're supposed to be charging stations on specific highways within 1 mile of the highway every 50 miles. And we have an EV council that's been developed by our own department. So individual state departments are responsible for mapping it and figuring out how to make it happen. And interestingly enough, I was on a call yesterday talking about public-private partnerships, P3, which really captures private investments to help public entities succeed and partner together. And this came up, and it is a real challenge to figure out whose land is it on? Who's going to own it? Is it going to be a public entity? Is it going to be a private entity? Who's going to collect the dollars? So lots and lots of questions about that. And our EV Council is working on all of those issues. And hopefully we'll have a product by the end of this year to bring forward about what this is going to look like in our state. So just yesterday, some competitive grants closed at the federal level. Washington, Oregon, and California went in together for a freight charging and mobility on the north-south corridor. So hopefully we will see those federal dollars come in and help us build out the freight mobility charging on our north-south corridor on I-5. There were also a tremendous number of community grants that were available, and hoping to see lots of Washington communities get some of those dollars coming in as well. There's another tranche of electric school bus monies coming in. So another round of that. We had 4 districts get some federal dollars from that. And we did invest heavily at the like $120 million went in from CCA dollars to help our buses electrify for school kids. We have hydrogen hubs that we went in with Oregon and Washington, and have something in front of the feds right now to try and bring money in to develop some hydrogen hubs. And then there's tons of port electrification dollars at the federal level as well that we're hoping to secure. Anyway, I think that's what I got for you before answering questions. But super excited about, like Karen said, there is a lot of money coming in. Our community being prepared to get those dollars is super important. And in any way that I can help, help that process, I'm happy to do that.
Great. I'll open it up for some questions. Do we have any questions for Representative Filio? Go ahead, Joe.
Well, just a little shout out to Representative Dolio for the port electrification. We were made aware of that last month at a Washington Public Ports Association meeting. And, the Port of Olympia plans is the commissioners are strongly behind that. And we hope to put a grant together to receive some of those dollars for the electrification of the fleet, as well as shore power at the dock. Thank you.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. That's good to hear.
I just have a couple things.
Michelle Murray has her hand up. I just want to make sure you saw that.
Thank you. I didn't. Michelle?
Everything you shared with us today, Beth, sounds exciting and wonderful. But I did have a concern about one thing. And that was that, studies have shown that because driver's ed hasn't been in school, that young people aren't driving. And that has fueled them using public transportation more, and has been able to reduce parking in the cities, and not having as many drivers on the road helps the environment and the climate, which is where we're going towards. So I guess I just kind of question the wisdom of reintroducing that when really we're trying to get that opposite effect going. So I'm having a hard time understanding why we're making that push now, when everything says we should be making the opposite. We should be encouraging more of this and encouraging more, mass transit.
Yeah, that's an interesting that's an interesting point. And it is also interesting, Michelle, that the person who introduced the bill is Senator Leas, who is all about getting kids onto transit. I think that unfortunately the statistics are so significant in terms of, if you look at the graph and you look at like who is having the safety and creating the safety problems on the road, it's super clear that it's these kids who do not have driver's education training and get their driver's license. And so trying to target that group of kids to make sure if they are on the road that they know how to drive is kind of what's behind that. I don't think the point is to get more kids driving. It's to get the kids who are choosing to drive to be safe. But
Okay,
I think that's a really interesting point that you bring up. And this bill was like seriously like reduced down to kind of bare minimum of like trying to figure out how to address that. And so as we're moving forward, I certainly will keep your observation and concerns in mind. I certainly agree with you.
Yeah, because my main concern is I hear what you're saying now, and I can see why that was considered, but I think what you're going to see actually is just an uptick of people taking driver's ed, which is going to put more drivers on the road. So maybe an alternative would be to require a driver safety course before they're licensed. And maybe, it's complicated. I understand that, but thank you for listening.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah.
Great. Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that are transportation related, but actually were more on the housing side of things. There was the transportation oriented development bill that did not pass this year, but I expect we'll see it again. I think Senator Leas was the sponsor of that one. But also in the middle housing bill, there's a component of it that doesn't apply to our region, but does eliminate minimum parking requirements within a half a mile of transit that meets certain thresholds. I think the lowest of that tier would be bus rapid transit, which I don't believe the one qualifies for. I think we are considered BRT light, and I don't know what that what that means, BRT versus BRT light. But it's something that I'll be interested to see more of from the legislature addressing minimum parking requirements. In Olympia, we did recently vote to eliminate minimum parking requirements for residential units within a half a mile of frequent transit, which is, you know, at least 12 hours a day, 4 stops an hour. You know, it actually gets us from the mall all the way to Lacey down Martin Way. So new residential buildings of any size, they're not required to include parking spaces unless the developer does their own assessment and says, well, no, we actually do need X amount here. And so I'm hoping to see more from the legislature in that. I think that we end up inducing a lot of vehicles on the road by providing more parking than what people actually need. And so I just wanted, there's so much with where the housing and transportation intersect. I just wanted to highlight some of those for everybody.
Yeah, I think it definitely would be worth talking with Rep. Bateman about 1110 and other missing middle or transit oriented development bills. I mean, she is the expert, so I don't delve in as deeply as I should, probably because she knows so much about it. But you know, her bill 1110 is very wide. You know, it's got a lot of great stuff in it to encourage transit-oriented development. Even though it is a missing middle bill, like Danny said, there's a lot of good stuff in there that moves us in the right direction.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Pete.
Well, hi, Beth. Great to have you back. Great to have you back in the legislature. I'm interested in your comments on the rail aspects of the airport bill, and I really do think that rather than investing billions of dollars to build a new airport, if we were to put that money into high-speed rail, connecting our state, I think it would certainly eliminate a lot of the local airplane trips and the associated impacts with that. But I also think it opens up an opportunity to connect an Eastern Washington airport, existing airport, like Moses Lake, that was looked at years ago, as a potential alternative to SeaTac. So I would certainly encourage continue looking at that. I think that is really where we should be investing our money. I really don't think it's feasible to significantly expand the Olympia Airport in terms of what it can do. There's just too much development, and the approach, as you know, would go right over the State House. So I don't think it would be a wise place to be putting large jets. But anyway, appreciate your work and hope to see progress in that direction in the future. And of course, thank you for continuing to think of trails. I think that's really locally something that I hope we can continue to invest and expand our network on. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you. And actually, Yakima really actually wants an airport in their community. Like, it was really funny. They came and testified. Like, everybody's like, no, 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 no. And then Yakima's like, yeah, we'd love an airport. Which is, you know, I mean, with rail from is that feasible? I don't know. And of course, getting over the mountains to Yakima is pretty tough. But So, but all of that will be looked at in this new process, and I think there will be a lot of more people engaged in the process, given the given how controversial the issue became and how organized people became around opposing those 3 sites. So,
is there anyone else before I ask a couple questions? I don't see any. Oh, go ahead, John.
I was going to hold off on this for some other time, but this is just as good as any. One of the things that you brought up is electrification of the state. Has there been any studies as far as how much electricity we actually have for the school buses that you mentioned and personal vehicles and all that kind of stuff? Because we can put these gas stations all over the place, and last year and the year before, California has been doing the same thing, and they've been going through brownouts during the summertime when it gets really warm down there. I don't think it's a good idea for us to start putting these things in without having some kind of a good idea of how much power we can generate, and so that we don't experience the same things that we should have learned from California. I'll stop right there. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
yeah, there's a tremendous amount of planning going on, looking at our grid and developing new energy sources, new clean energy sources. And so, for example, we have in place legislation which moves us to 100% clean electricity by 2045. And we also have the Climate Commitment Act, which is, the law of Washington State, which requires us to reduce our emissions to near net zero by 2050. And so there's, obviously the electric grid is going to have to grow. We're going to have to use electricity much more efficiently. There's a lot we can do in terms of energy efficiency and demand response, while at the same time building that out. So we passed a siting bill, which works with local communities, tribes, and entities across the state to determine where best to put new electrical clean energy projects, whether that's solar, wind, geothermal, nuclear is also, within our energy mix. And so that's gonna, help us more easily permit those projects. And then we also had a similar bill around transmission, because once we permit those projects, then we have to get them transmitted to the places where people are actually using the electricity. So there's a tremendous amount of work going on with the PUDs, the Independence, Puget Sound Energy, and Avista, as well as the rural electric co-ops, to really consider where the energy is. Currently with hydropower, we have a significant amount of extra energy that we actually sell onto the grid and onto California. That's energy that is right here in our community that could be used in the short term to really help us as we grow this. So we're not talking about tomorrow having all of this electrified. We're talking about a long transition that is planned, that makes sure that we have reliability. Reliability, like you said, John, is absolutely 100% important. It is in every bill that we talk about. We have lots going on in that reliability space because no one wants brownouts. We don't succeed if we have them. So those, and then also just making sure that we are, as we're building clean energy, we're doing it in a way that is sensitive to local communities and tribes.
May I ask one more?
Sure.
Okay. Is there some way, because I'm not elected to worry about any place else in the state. I'm elected to worry about Thurston County, and that's all I worry about is Thurston County. This is paramount to me. Okay. Is there any kind of reports that we can have that we can start following along, so we can tell our people that this is the plan, where they already know that the governor said all the different things that you said, that we have to do this, we have to do that, but we don't have any hard copy to say, okay, this is how far along we're going.
Are you talking about for PSC, since they're the provider here?
Yeah, from PSC, from anybody. We hear nothing. There's a commercial on, I asked a representative from PSC, and the commercial's been going for about 6 months where they're saying they're hardening the system. I asked somebody about that, and they said, well, I've never seen a commercial.
So I'm happy to share the state energy plan. That's a great place to start. So when Karen, I know Karen's going to send out the budget spreadsheets that I shared, but I can also send her the link to the state energy plan. That is probably the best place to start. And then that has all kinds of links from there as well that will take you to allow you to kind of go into for additional depth.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that I've realized that, especially when it comes to electrical vehicle charging, is most of the charging happens at night. And so there's a lot of places that actually you can set your car to charge at during a specific hour because it's cheaper to do it. But here, PSC doesn't have a tiered rate for charging during the night. So there's no incentive to charge at night. You just charge it whenever it's the same price. It'd be nice to see some of that go through where there's some tiered charging, so it gives you more of an incentive to charge your vehicle at night and not just charge it whenever, and that gives you more capacity on the grid. So that's 2 cents there.
Yeah.
The airport. Obviously, we all were inundated with the airport, and we've had some conversations about it. And I think a lot of us have thought long and hard about how we overcome this huge issue. Obviously, it's a capacity issue. There's no easy answers. Moving out to Yakima or wherever. I mean, that's really going to be difficult. I really think the one quickest fix where we're talking about capacity is McChord Air Force Base. And we've seen other examples across the country where you've had shared use with a military installation be very successful. They already have runways. They already have traffic. They're right off of I-5. The rail is right there. And so, I really hope in the near term we can take a look, of course, at Payne Field, and the other established airports, but I think McChord could really work, and they have some clear zone issues that we could totally help out with in exchange for a little commercial aviation there. That would be very nice. And the other thing I want to talk about is along electrical vehicle charging stations is everyone across the United States right now is trying to buy electric vehicle charging stations, and the lead time has gotten to a point where you order something, good luck if it ever show up. And so I think needs to be continued incentives where else we can to make sure we have local producers and manufacturers of these charging stations, because that was another issue we had found is the especially you're dealing with a federal grant, it has to be made in the United States, or majority of it has to be made in the United States, and we run into some of that issues as well. So there's a big push for these electric vehicles charging stations, not only for the homes, but for the commercial use, and there's just not enough supply out there, which is an unfortunate issue as well.
Yes, same with transformers. As we're building out our grid, there's a big supply chain issue with transformers. So lots of issues to overcome, no question about it.
Yep.
But I'm hopeful that we will solve it.
Me too.
The ingenuity of the Americans is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else for Representative Doyle? Well, thank you so much. It was great to hear from Andrew when he came in and addressed us. It was wonderful to hear from you. You guys have a great working relationship for the benefit of 26 for our region. So we really appreciate it.
Great. Awesome. All right.
Okay,
thanks so much for all you do.
Thanks, Beth. Okay, now we're on to the TRPC allocation of the federal carbon reduction programming funds. Katrina.
Good morning, everyone. So we're going to talk about staff's recommendation and request that you make a recommendation to council regarding the carbon reduction programming funds. So just again, a lot of this you've already heard, but on November 15th of 2021, the president signed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It's also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. The bill authorizes a new carbon reduction program to reduce transportation emissions. And CRP funding can be used on a variety of projects that reduce transportation emissions, primarily CO2, including many of the transportation alternatives, the TA projects, and congestion mitigation and air quality projects. Those are the CBAC projects that we already program out funds for. The state is responsible for developing a statewide carbon reduction plan, and that is due in November this year. And then they are also responsible for providing the majority of the funding for local projects. So 65% of the funding is required to go to local entities for projects that reduce transportation emissions. And there is a 13.5% match required for using these grant funds. Eligible projects, there are a lot of them: bicycle and ped facilities, energy efficient street lighting and traffic control devices, supporting deployment of alternative fuel vehicles. Public transportation projects is a big category for this. There's advanced transportation congestion management technologies, intelligent transportation system improvements, and vehicle to infrastructure communications equipment. And there are a lot of other projects that span what these funds can be utilized for. Over the next 5 years, starting in 2022, we have about $2.6 million that we can allocate out. As I discussed previously, this is a new pot of funding. And there's a lot of things that we don't know. We don't know how long the funds are going to be guaranteed for. We know we have 5 years, but we assume that they will continue past 2026. We know that urban, small, and rural funding pots present a challenge because there are few existing projects. Both projects already awarded funding and those on the contingency list that would qualify for this funding. And the amount is so small year to year that federalizing projects may not make sense. It requires a lot more overhead to administer those projects. Many jurisdictions are facing staffing contracting challenges that make it difficult to get existing projects done. We've heard about supply chain issues as well that can play into some of these. New projects that really move the needle are not necessarily in the works. And given these concerns and staffing and contracting constraints, creating those new projects from scratch that can utilize this funding isn't realistic in the short term. And by the short term, I mean in the next year or two. So once TRPC officially becomes a transportation management area, and that is official as of June 5th, the geographic areas are going to be changing. So we'll be having an urbanized area, urban, small, and rural. And so that means that the allocation amounts are going to change as well, probably not to a great extent, but they will. So that's something to keep in mind for future years of this funding. And then the Rural Community Support Program is going to be issuing a call for projects this fall. And we know that Thurston County has been willing to put these funds on a project so that they can be flipped for the rural communities, but they just don't have the capacity right now. In other words, they don't have a rural project that they can put this type of funding on immediately. And then finally, the next call for projects is anticipated in 2024. And that's to program out dollars for 2028 to 2030 for our TA program, CMAQ, and our STBG program. We just don't know at this time if there are different reporting requirements for CRP. versus these other pots of fundings that we administer, and that might increase administrative work associated with the award. So all of these unknowns are kind of swirling in the background, but we have an immediate need to program out funding, and we need to develop a plan for programming funding out in the future years. So staff's recommendation is two parts. The first is to award a total of 1.06 million in CRP funding to 5 projects for obligation by June 30th of next year. The second part of our recommendation is to issue a call for projects in 2024 for the remaining allocations, which is for obligation between 2025 and 2027. And that's approximately 1.5 million. But again, that amount is going to change based on actual allocations and those changes in our geographic areas. Last time we talked about this, staff was also interested in developing a regional carbon reduction strategy. But we heard back from WashDOT about this, and we cannot use the funding for this purpose locally. So the $80,000 that we had proposed for this purpose will therefore, we're recommending roll forward to the next call for projects. And that's reflected in that 1.5 million in part 2 of staff's recommendation. Excuse me. When we put out a request for projects that could receive this type of funding in the short term, so obligations by June 30th, we heard of next year, we heard back and had a total of 9 projects that could receive this funding. About half of them were inner city transit projects. We had no urban small projects requesting funding, and we only had 1 rural project requesting funding. So in looking at all the projects that we had, we tried to set some benchmarks and some criteria for how do we come up with our staff recommendation. So we set out a maximum of 1 project funded from each agency. We looked at doing an order of preference. So projects that are funding secured and obligated are the highest priority. Projects that are sitting on the contingency list would be the lowest priority. And then we established some scoring criteria. We looked at the equity score and the greenhouse gas reduction score from the last call for projects and utilized that and scored the projects requesting funding. We also validated that with TAC members to make sure that they understood where we were coming from and didn't see any issues with the scoring that we established. And we also just used that order of preference and scored projects according to that as well. So for the urban medium, staff's recommendation is to fund 4 projects. For one, for City of Lacey is a College Street Corridor Improvements, Phase 3. Olympia is the Phones Road Transportation. Tumwater is the Israel Road and Lenderson Way pedestrian and bicycle improvements, and Intercity Transit's East Martin Way roundabout. The funding for these projects is fairly consistent. And the reason for that is because each of these projects could receive $600,000 or more in additional funding. And so with such high requests, and since these projects all score similarly, we kind of split it evenly. I do want to note, because Intercity Transit submitted so many projects that could receive this funding, we went ahead and asked them which project was their priority. So the East Martin Way roundabout, while it did not score the highest of Intercity Transit's projects, it was their highest priority, and that's why that's reflected in staff's recommendation. For the rural area, the Nisqually tribe had a contingency project, and that's their fleet electrification and resilient energy project. And so this is the only project that requested funding for the rural area. So for 2024, we're recommending that a call for projects be issued for the carbon reduction program funding, and that would be in the same done at the same time as our other pots of funding that we issue call for. So the TA, STBG, and CMAQ. if applicable. The target year for the CRP funding, though, is a little different. Everything else, all those other pots would be 28 to 2030. And this one would be a target obligation date of 2025 to 2027. And again, $50,000 originally proposed for the regional carbon reduction strategy. So our next steps, we met with TAC on May 18th, just to review staff's recommendation. There weren't too many concerns raised about what we had proposed. June 2nd, we took this to council for their first review, and now we're back here with you guys asking for a recommendation. This will then go back to council on July 7th for a decision for final action, after which award letters would be issued. So our request today is that you recommend council award a total of 1.06 billion in CRP funding to the 5 projects we've recommended for obligation by June 30th of 2024. And then secondly, to recommend council issue that call for projects for CRP allocations for a target obligation between 2025 and 2027. And so with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all might have.
Do you need this in, I'm sorry, do you need this in 2 separate motions?
I don't believe it needs to be in 2 separate motions. Just easier to list it out that way.
Before we get there, can I ask a quick question? Is the match that we're requiring, the 13.5, is that something that we're requiring, or is it a federal requirement?
The federal requirement.
Okay. And the other question I have is for interstate transit. That was their highest priority, but it didn't score the highest. What project scored the highest?
The highest scoring projects for interstate transit was their walk and roll program, if I remember correctly. And I can pull the staff report up and double check that. But it was a 1-point difference between them.
Oh,
and if I recall correctly, they were looking at that being more of an expansion of existing service, not necessarily to fill a shortfall in funding for what they had originally requested, but I'm happy to turn it over to staff from Intercity Transit if they have that answer as well.
I didn't know if there were questions, but we can certainly state that I think the Martin Way roundabout project will also be a component of hopefully expanding a bus rapid transit program past the light phase as we've been using that terminology. So, and we do feel that walk and roll is on sure footing right now as far as the program needs, but this would be something that would be a greater priority for us as far as regional mobility. So, but happy to have an offline discussion too, if there's any more questions.
No, I was just curious of what the different scores were. If there was a 3 points difference, then we should, if it comes to prioritization, that should, especially with these funds, I felt like it should go to the highest scoring project. But in this case, if it's so close, I understand where you're coming from.
And I would just clarify that the highest scoring intercity transit project was the walk and roll for 2023, 2024, and 2024, 2025 school years. It scored 1 additional point because it is a project that is already obligated. It's not one that is going to be obligating in the next year, if that makes sense. So that was the difference.
Oh, okay. Well, that doesn't change anything. Okay. Is there a motion on what other just quick? Don.
I just want to echo what Emily said. I think we consider bus rapid transit getting our feet really wet in this whole thing is really critical, and I think that's why we opted to.
Yeah.
Make that option. And this roundabout is critical for
that. I appreciate that. The other quick question I have is I know as late as yesterday, Tenino was looking to get some federal funding for electrical vehicle charging stations. And there was a grant opportunity, but they didn't have the access to the grant portfolio or something. They needed their own number, or I'm not sure what ever happened to that. But it came in last second. They asked if Lacey could maybe help them, but that means we would have to federalize the project, and that required a larger discussion than trying to do something last minute. Are these funds? Could these funds be used for the call for projects for something like that for Tenino?
So it wouldn't be able to be utilized for that at this point in time, only because that's not a project that's included in our contingency list. If it were on our contingency list, then absolutely it could have been considered in that pool of candidate projects. That's what I would say.
So it's currently not on the contingency list, so it's not going to be eligible for this call for project coming up.
It would, so for the call for projects coming up, they can submit an application requesting the funding, absolutely. But for the immediate dollars that we're trying to get programmed out by next year, it wouldn't work out.
Okay. Well, hopefully someone can have that conversation. You pass that along, John.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I get a motion then?
So moved.
Pete has his hand up and so do I.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Danny and Pete, go ahead.
Pete
Go
has
ahead,
his hand up
Danny.
first, go ahead.
I guess just I wanted to follow up on Karen's comments, and that one of the challenges I see here is this is, I hate to say this in this way, but it's only $500,000 a year. And even and my understanding is these projects were projects that were federalized or already, so it didn't make a big difference in terms of administrative expense. But with that small amount of money, it almost seems like in the future we ought to just be allocating this money to one project and not trying to spread it around like we have this year. I'm okay with this year's recommendation for that reason, but I do think some way of focusing this money on either a narrower list of projects or like you've done here, supplementing existing federalized projects is really the only way we can efficiently spend this money. And I do agree. I think we've got a huge problem with staff capability with these federal grants. They are quite burdensome to administer. There's a lot of extra hoops you have to follow through, and not to mention just the act of applying for the grant. So I do think it's a challenge. I don't know the solution to that. It's hard to find staff, even if you've got money for staff. So I just wanted to make that observation. I of course would like to see this money go more directly towards pedestrian bicycle type stuff. But sometimes those projects aren't queued up to move ahead right away with. Anyway, that's my thought on that. Danny?
I'm glad I let you go first, Pete, because you just captured my exact sentiment. It's such a challenge to spend federal dollars, and this is such a small amount that we don't have the best options in front of us. Though I do want to hold up the need for additional staff to have more projects in the pipeline for this funding, for other funding opportunities coming up. We're looking at that for ourselves in Olympia. We've got a huge gap in our what we need for transportation, particularly for alternative transportation in our city, as I'm sure everybody does. That's what we talk about here. So we are looking at ways that we can bring on additional staff to help us be prepared for as funding becomes available. And I know that that's a conversation that we've had for TRPC is having additional staff so that we can regionalize some of these projects. So, you know, I am interested in continuing that conversation. I know it's like kind of been a little unclear on what we might do in that regard, but just wanted to echo what Pete just said, but also acknowledge what Karen was saying, that you know, generally not having enough staff to have projects ready for funding is going to be a challenge for all of us.
Thank you, Danny. And I want to reiterate what she just said. There's over a year and almost a year and a half ago now, I came to Transportation Policy Board saying that we need TRPC to bring on staffing to do projects just like this. Here we are a year and a half later, we still have the need. And it's very frustrating that we can all see the problem. We all point to it. We all know what we need to do to fix the problem. And yet we're not fixing it. And it's extremely frustrating, to say the least. And some of that's come from pushback from some jurisdictions, from some jurisdiction staff. Feel like maybe they're going to give up a little power. I don't think that's the case. I think we can collaborate, work together, and go after some of these bigger funds and find which projects moves the needle the most. As Karen asked us to do at the beginning, it doesn't make sense to spread this money around and really do make no significant impact when the whole focus of these funds is to do just that. So I've said for a long time, I'd rather put all this money on a big project and then take turns, so to speak, doing bigger projects when it comes to federal funding than to barely make a difference. We're doing it this way because we know it's so hard to spend federal dollars, right? And so we're just spreading it out a little bit. That shouldn't be I don't think that was the intent of these dollars. And so I think we do need to continue to have this conversation. How do we spend federal dollars? What's the most efficient way to spend federal dollars? We should look at the bigger projects. We should be collaborating. We need TRPC to, it'd be nice if TRPC had their staff that would help these, especially the smaller jurisdictions that obviously need the help. So I don't know what else I can do, or I'm not sure if we need conversations, more conversations. I don't know if TPB needs to make a recommendation to TRPC, to the full council. That's what we need to do. And if they vote it down, so be it. But, I don't know. I don't know what the next step is, but I'm frustrated about it as well. In the meantime, here's what we're doing. Here's a recommendation from staff. I wish it was more along the lines of the bigger project and we could see some real change, but this is what we have. So does anyone else have anything to add before we get a motion?
Mark had his hand up, but he took it down, and then John and Don both have their hands up.
Yeah.
Okay. Which one did you pick?
Go ahead, John.
Okay, thank you. I'm pretty sure the answer is no, but I've never heard it asked. Is there any way, either on the federal side or on the state side, that we can get grant money for TRPC to hire a couple more staff to help all the jurisdictions throughout Thurston County? Doing such a thing would make it a lot easier to take what money we are getting and apply it to that one big project year in and year.
Mark, is there specific funding?
There are a number of different things we could do, and that's why I raised my hand earlier. This is something, I like Chair said, we've been talking about for some time, and so actually we've put some staff resource to try and go after some of these federal funds for TRPC, but anytime we're going after funds for TRPC, it involves you all as our members. And so, and one of the biggest challenges isn't just TRPC capacity, although that is one of the challenges we've had to kind of carve out. Time isn't billable to other projects. But it's also, as Karen Mesmer said, the capacity of staff in all of your departments and such as well to have the ability to work with us on some of these. But we're going after a few different grant applications in terms of building resource going forward. We've got the opportunity to talk about that as we're building the UPWP each year. We have an opportunity to talk about that in our call for projects and how we use some of the federal funds. We could use some added some capacity through that. I mean, there are a lot of different ways we could do it if TPB and council get to the point of asking us as staff to come up with some alternatives for how we could fund some added capacity for grant coordination among our members.
Go ahead, Andy. Ask for it.
Well, I definitely think we need to think about moving something along to TRPC from TPB.
A quick comment, Andy, about what Pete mentioned and what you mentioned about the preference at some points to go for bigger projects. I think we have to look back and say we charged TRPC with coming up with a very objective analytical process that would be equitable in the short term. Maybe there's another chapter needed to basically build in the ability when the TRPC agreed to set that aside for a year to go after a bigger project. Food for thought, I guess, is all I'm saying.
Well, yeah, I know the equity piece is an interesting piece, right? Because, but equity is not just spreading things around evenly to everyone. That's what sometimes people think about. But we're talking about the bigger picture of equity between the urban and the rural, looking at projects that benefit more people, so on and so forth. So there's a lot you can look at in terms of the equity side of things. But we also have some bigger discussions here that I think we're ready to have. We just need to tee them up, and I'll continue to work with leadership and see if we can get something to do that. And let's just see how this all plays out. But until then, we have two motions that are before us.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve staff's recommendations as presented. Is there any more discussion? And all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Then that motion carries. And thank you so much. And I do appreciate the conversation. I do appreciate TPB and where we've been on this issue. I do think we might need to be a little more prescriptive in the future, right? When it comes to what type of projects that we want, because right now the easy thing to do is just to do what we're doing, is to put money on projects that are already fertilized. And I understand all that. I get the ease of doing that for sure. But I've always preached, let's think bigger. Let's think outside the box. Let's see if we can actually do bigger projects and move the needle. And that's going to require a little more focus and probably a little more political will on our parts to be making recommendations like that, because I think that's the only way it's going to happen. It's my 2 cents. Okay. Transit safety performance measure targets. Sorry. So let's go on to that.
Good morning again. So if this is sounding a little bit familiar to you, that's because it is. We've had performance measures presented to you over the last few months, including transit safety performance measures when they were adopted into the regional transportation plan. So this is just an update of those performance measures that were added to the RTP. as part of a federal requirement. Oh, and I also want to acknowledge that Jason Hanner from Intercity Transit is here. He is the expert on all things intercity transit and their transit safety performance. So if there are questions that arise after my presentation that I can't answer, he is the expert room to get you the answer you need. But as part of a federal requirement, Intercity Transit is required to develop a public transportation action safety plan and set performance measures and targets. Their plan was adopted in September of 2020. Federal rules also require TRPC in its role as the planning organization for the Thurston region to adopt transit safety performance targets. IT is the only public agency transit provider in the region. Staff's recommendation is that TRPC adopt Intercity Transit's updated transit safety performance measure targets. This is something that they update on an annual basis. And so by adopting updated targets annually in the past, that's what has happened. So I just want to kind of give you a picture of what is IT's transit safety performance. And so this chart has the last 3 years, but when you're comparing 2021 versus 2022, there were no fatalities in either year. Injuries increased by 1, safety events reduced by 1, and system reliability decreased slightly. But when you look at how these measures are, or these performance measures are tracked, it's based on vehicle revenue miles. And so what you're seeing is that since the start of the pandemic, IT's vehicle revenue miles have increased substantially, but you're not seeing too much of a difference in these transit safety performances. For 2023, transit safety performance targets represent no change in fatalities. IT is anticipating an increase of injuries by 1 and safety events to increase by 2, and they anticipate system reliability to increase substantially. And just so you know, system reliability is the distance between significant breakdowns in a vehicle. So these are the 2023 transit safety performance targets. So the timeline is council had their first review last week or 2 weeks ago, June 2nd, we'll just say that. Today we are here with the TPB on June 14th, and then this will go back to council for adoption or action on their consent calendar on July 7th. And so that requested action is to recommend council adopt IT's performance measures. And so I will stop sharing my screen. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions and anything I can't touch. Jason Hanner is here to back me up.
Yeah, motion.
No approval. John O'Callaghan.
Second, Don.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Then that motion unanimously carries. Well, with that, we've reached the end of our agenda. So anything for the good of the order?
Yeah, you all guys all should come down to Tenino this weekend. We got the local radio station and KGY is coming down. We've got the 5K run for Rowan and ribbon cutting for the new playground equipment out at the park.
Boy, and if you guys haven't been to the Tenino Park recently, you really need to go check it out. You guys have done some amazing work. It's transformative is all I can say. I was down there for a mayor's forum where all the mayors get together and saw all the work that's been done over the quarry and the pool and that area. I didn't even know there was another pool back, another water area back there. I had no idea
They're changing that too.
Yeah, and so it's done a lot of work, done some great work there. And so yeah, go check out Tenino. It's a great place.
Thank you.
Anything else? the one thing just for the good of the order, it's been still on my mind about the CRP funds. The one thing that we've been talking about for a while is what's our trail maintenance program, right? You know, we know some of our major trail networks that need some help, you know, need some lighting, need new pavement. There's roots growing through, and I still haven't gotten a really good answer about what our plan is to continue to maintain and upgrade our trail system. Is there something that we can bring forward, or you know, what can we do to get some more information about that, so we can maybe make some further recommendations on how we maintain that system? Mark?
Well, I think so we're kind of wrapping up the regional trails plan right now. Ongoing maintenance is a big part of that. And I think to do the kind of thing that I think you're talking about, Chair, where maybe we pool some resources for maintenance, that is something we certainly could consider, certainly could work on. What the plan calls for is for us really starting to more regularly convene the different jurisdictions, because where we're at right now is each trail owner is maintaining the trail, you know, on their own for the most part. But we do have an opportunity to work across the different trail owners, prioritize segments, prioritize types of maintenance and preservation. And that kind of coordination is anticipated and called for in the plan. So I think we've got that opportunity, but we aren't there right now, Chair, as you know.
Yeah, you know, and if it's not in the plan, if we don't have it within our plan and put it out there, it doesn't exist, right? And so you can't have any funding opportunities to do that stuff unless you get into the plan and approve the plan.
It'll be coming your way in the not too distant future.
Okay, well, with that, we have reached our end of our agenda. Hope everyone enjoys this nice weather that we've been having, although yesterday got a little cold, but
Today too.
But hope everyone enjoys the weather, and we'll see you next month. And so without objection, I'll call this meeting adjourned. See you.
Non-debatable motion. You all have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.